And I was reading a book on Austrian economics last night, and they were talking about trying to define economics. And it struck me that the most suitable definition was something like the science of comparative value. It looks like that's what economists concentrate on. And then money becomes an index of comparative value. And then that leads, well, I'm going to talk to Robert next. I'll get him to introduce himself. But I know Robert has written a fair bit philosophically on the implications of money in general as a signal of value and of Bitcoin in particular. So Robert.
Hey, Jordan. My name is Robert Breedlove. It's a great honor to speak with you today. I'll just say that your work has had a profound impact on my life that I'd probably struggle to put into words, so I'll just leave it at thank you. I'm a lifelong student of philosophy and economics, although more recently, thanks to Bitcoin, I actually was introduced to Austrian economics. So I've been going down that rabbit hole for the past 4 years. My background before that is I have a master's degree in accounting and finance. I was a CPA for a number of years. So I did tax strategies for high net worth individuals, investment partnerships. From there, I moved on to be pretty much a career CFO focused in technology. And then most recently, I was operating a hedge fund before. Last year, 2020 was transformative for a lot of us. And this quote from H.G. Wells really struck me and resonated. He said that civilization is a race between education and catastrophe. And my realization is that the world is so poorly informed about the socioeconomic significance and even philosophic significance of Bitcoin that it was incumbent upon me to take what I think I see as the solution to many problems in the world and just pour all my energy into education. And to that end, I started the What is Money show. I called it this because I do believe that question, what is money? This is the gateway to this rabbit hole that we've all fallen down. It is the key to unlocking a lot of the untruths in the world. And I think it's also the key to perceiving the corruption that's embedded in our current socioeconomic system, at the core of which is central banking, which I'm sure we'll get into a lot today. I would just, to echo a couple of the things that were mentioned earlier, that question, what is money, has a lot of answers. One of which, as I think you've related in the past, is that money is essentially a contract with the future. And today, fiat currency, it's a violated social contract. So we have a money by which an institution effectively robs our future. They're compelling the demand for this money and they're violating its supply to enrich themselves and dispossessing everyone else, mostly people economically vulnerable. And to the point about morality, it's like if we don't have a secure social contract in the most important market in the world, which is money, then we can't possibly have a foundation for a sound social morality. So it causes people to be more short-term thinking when your money doesn't hold value over time. You can't plan. You can't create trusting long-term relationships. And then the last piece to that is, with central banking violating the supply of money, they are twisting our perceptions. We perceive the world economically through prices. And when that perceptual mechanism is twisted, it breaks down your valuations, your goal orientations.
Your trust.
Really just trust. Yeah, it really corrodes socioeconomic fabric, social morality, and even individually, to John's point, I think it really breaks us down. And I've experienced that personally in my life. I've kind of flown high and mighty on the fiat currency standard, and I've experienced a certain set of character traits develop in myself, and I've experienced an antithetical set of traits develop in myself as a result of studying and interacting deeply with Bitcoin. So can you
elaborate on that a little bit? You're making a moral contrast that's personal. There's a story there. I'm kind of curious about it. So
I made a lot of money quickly at a young age, and I would say that I walked a bit of a darker path where I just thought that I had made it. I had arrived. I would just kind of party and cut up and travel. I didn't have I had lost that deeper sense of meaning or sense of purpose that you speak so eloquently to. And, you don't know it when you're up against it. I still thought that I was doing good things and was more or less a good person, but I was just going further and further off course, becoming more and more short-term oriented, more and more pursuing immediate biological gratification, whether it's, drinking or whatever. And And Bitcoin and this rabbit hole just gave me the larger lens, which we talk about time preference. And when we say lowering your time preference, what we mean is we're expanding your time horizons. So you gain a greater sphere of concern, let's say, beyond yourself. And that sphere is made up of space and time. And as you do that, you start to see yourself as increasingly a more humble and infinitesimal piece of the total picture. But somehow it also enriches you to want to really dig into whatever gifts you have and give back to the whole picture.
And why do you think the fiat currency versus Bitcoin issue is relevant to that conundrum?
We could say it in the very severe original state of nature, where we're all just cavemen running around trying to eat and have shelter. That is an environment with a lot of scarcity, right? There's a lot of economic scarcity because we haven't begun to trade. We haven't created the division of labor and specialization that creates wealth. And I would argue that fiat currency, because it generates arbitrary inflation. So it's artificially magnifying prices in the world. It's increasing prices when prices should be declining as we get smarter. It's actually magnifying the perception of scarcity in the world. And I think that contributes to social divisiveness, up to and including things like cancel culture and other things we see in the world today. I really believe that artificial central bank induced inflation is a corrosive moral cancer on society. And I think we underestimate.
Okay, so let's get some terms straight so that everybody knows what we're talking about. So maybe we start with fiat currency. And Gigi, I'm going to pick on you next because I want you to give us a technical description of Bitcoin, if you would, and then we can start exploring its psychological and philosophical implications. So let's talk about fiat currency. Contrast that with a gold standard of Bitcoin, and then let's talk also about central banking and inflation, and just flesh that out so everybody knows where we're at. That's for you, Robert. Sorry, that's for Robert. I'll get Gigi. I'll turn to you for the technical description of Bitcoin.
You'd like me to start with central banking?
Sure.
Yeah, so to give the very high level description, again, the answer to what is money has many questions or many answers, but one of them is we could say that it's a device for moving value or expressing value across space and time. And historically, it's a technology, right? The free market selects what the best tool for the job is. That's true for essentially every market in the world today, but we've never allowed that to be the case in the realm of money. And the best approximation of that historically was gold. So if we understand that as a technology, money needs to fulfill 5 critical properties. It needs to be divisible, durable, recognizable, portable, and scarce. And I'll gloss over a lot of history, but essentially monetary metals best satisfied the divisibility, durability, recognizability, and portability properties of money. And of the monetary metals, gold was the most scarce. And scarcity of money, so what scarcity means is when demand outstrips supply. But what's unique about money is that demand always exceeds supply. There's never enough, people always want more money, right? It's not like you're going to reach a certain amount of apples in your kitchen and you're satisfied with apples. There's always more demand for money. So we could say that money always has this scarcity property inherent to it. But the market gravitates towards the good that best satisfies those first 4 properties, and then fifthly, has the most inflexible supply. So another way to say this is the most inflation-resistant monetary technology tends to be favored by market actors because, as it turns out, surprisingly enough, or not surprisingly, people don't like to get stolen from via inflation. You want to hold the money that holds its rarity and scarcity across time such that no one can dilute you.
And that's so why do you regard inflation as theft?
So inflation, it's just very simple supply and demand economics. If price or purchasing power in the case of money is where supply meets demand, if someone can arbitrarily increase the supply, they can steal purchasing power from the others using that as a store of value. So that's why, again, gold was selected on the market because there was sacrifice necessary to obtain gold. You had to expend time and energy to dig it out of the ground, such that in this game theoretic selection of money, everyone could trust that no one could arbitrarily violate the supply of gold. Because if they could, they would just print gold if you could and steal value.
Dilute it with silver or something like that, which happened on occasion.
Which they did. Yeah, they've counterfeited gold and any number of things. The problem with gold, though, essentially is that it was great for holding value. Again, back to our original definition, money is a device for moving value across time and space. So gold is excellent at holding value across time, but metals are pretty poor, especially for a globalizing society, at expressing value across space. They're very heavy and difficult to move. They're expensive to move, expensive to secure, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where paper currency was introduced. By abstracting gold into a paper currency, we could now increase its transactability across space. And so long as it was redeemable 1 for 1, right? 1 unit of currency for 1 ounce of gold, for instance, then it maintained its ability to express value across time as well. So we're basically augmenting this free market selected technology to make it more transactable across space and time. The problem with that, of course, is that it introduced the need. First of all, it made money debt. So now all of a sudden we don't have money. We have a paper certificate that's redeemable for money, which is gold. So this paper certificate becomes a debt instrument. And the problem is you now needed to trust the custodian, the bank, whoever's holding that gold. You have to trust that they will not produce paper currency in excess of their gold reserves. Otherwise, they are then the one artificially inflating the currency and able to steal from everyone else. And as it turns out, again, money's like being the most important technology in the world. The temptation to manipulate its supply has proven historically to be essentially irresistible. And banks, which tend to become central banks or nationalized banking operations over time, have always violated that trust function placed within them.
Can you give us some recent examples of that?
Well, sure. In 1971, the infamous Nixon shock, he took the world off a gold standard. Subsequent to World War II, we held the Bretton Woods Conference, where it was determined unilaterally by the United States that the dollar would be pegged to gold. Every other currency in the world would be pegged to the dollar. So this gave the United States the infamous exorbitant privilege to just basically be able to print whatever amount of money they want, send the world these paper certificates called dollars, and then receive goods and services in exchange. But other countries agreed to this, 1, because the US was the dominant military power at the time, and 2, because dollars were redeemable for gold. But from between 1944 and 1971, it reached a point where enough countries had lost faith in the dollar that they were asking to redeem their currencies for gold, that Nixon decided to spontaneously close the gold window. So he just moved the world off of a gold standard onto a purely fiat currency standard. And then since that point, actually since 1971 through today, it's been about a 50-year experiment, we have had disastrous socioeconomic consequences across a whole gamut of data. There's a great website to this effect I would just encourage listeners to check out called WTFhappenedin1971.com. And we've had obesity, suicide, addiction, clearly global debt to GDP has exploded. It just points towards the devastating force that is arbitrary inflation. So yeah, I hope that answers it.